Hey everybody, Jamie here. Just wanted to give you guys a Monday morning excuse to piss off from work for a little bit longer. So the notion of this is how to build mansions out of time. And this comes actually from a dear friend of mine, Stevie Brown, who is a world-class fly fishing guide. And he was guiding up in Alaska, I believe. And he had an old guide mentor up there who basically said, hey, he said, look, man, I host all of these incredibly wealthy guys, these Goldman bankers and these Hollywood studio dudes and all this kind of stuff. But all of them are time poor. He goes up here and he kind of cast his eyes around the giant majestic peaks of Alaska and the trout streams, and he said, I build mansions out of time. So a couple of thoughts, because obviously if any of you have been jumping into Stealing Fire, our new book that came out last week, it's been absolutely killing it. If you haven't got one yet, feel free. Check out Audible. Audible featured it as an editor's choice, I think, and the review is incredibly sweet. But it's moving a lot of people. A lot of people are fired up. And one of the things that we talk about, the central thesis is states of ecstasis, non-ordinary states of consciousness, where you change the channel from regular 21st century normal, tired, wired, and stressed, to other channels of brainwave, neurochemistry, cardiac, respiratory patterns, disclose interesting and different information. And one of the qualities that comes when you get good at those ecstasis experiences, those moments stepping outside yourself, is you tend to experience a sense of timelessness. You step outside of regular waking time into what Stanford Phil Zimbardo calls the deep now. And different people have different time signatures, different relationships to time. There's what he calls them the presence and the future. So a lot of indigenous and traditional societies are often very present-oriented, sometimes hedonistic, just enjoy the sensation, sometimes pessimistic. Like if you're a refugee and you're living day-to-day in a camp, you might be present time orientation with a very dark or bleak view. There's no point planning because life is out of my hands. If, on the other hand, you were living in Tahiti in the 18th century when, what's his bucket, Manet went there, I believe, and Gauguin for sure. Those dudes were probably like, hey man, I've got nothing but now, right? And that was the hedonic present. So we, in a society, in our contemporary 21st century information economy West, are very much futures, and we are often sort of Calvinistic futures, the idea of sacrifice in the now to pay off in the later. And that can be a very ant and the grasshopper style, very sage move, especially to prepare for times of lean, but it can also be a situation where you keep grabbing for the brass rings and nothing ever satisfies. So if it's all put off until tomorrow, then when the hell do I ever get to feel alive today? So that's the kind of broad landscape of what we're about to jump into. What I would recommend is probably a 4-step process to take you all the way soup to nuts on how to experience mansions of time in our own lives without busting the bank on the mortgage, right? So step 1, this sounds ridiculously obvious, but if you check out Dr. Mike Bruce, he's a friend and a colleague of ours. He's just written a book called The Power of When, and he has a quick and easy free kind of chronotype, like test your time signature. What are your circadian rhythms? What people typically think of as owls and larks. He's broken down into 2 additional categories, so there's 4 overall, so it's a little finer grained. Still very much edutainment, but a good way for you to initially diagnose what is my natural circadian rhythm? When am I most alive and alert? When do I want to do deep reflective thinking? When do I want to move my body? When do I want to make love? When do I want to go weed in the garden? And when do I want to nap? And fundamentally, 21st century West, with always on electrics, lights, communications, etc., we've completely whacked that out, and our circadian rhythms in the workplace are typically cued off 50-year-old white males, aka the boss, and their circadian rhythms, due to the decrease in melatonin that happens over time, are typically earlier, much, much earlier than millennial workers, than other people, than nursing moms, than a whole host of other people, and yet we're all on that schedule. So we're rewarded for being larks. We're rewarded for getting up early to bed. Old Ben Franklin, healthy, wealthy, and wise, that whole shtick. And there is a subtle, both professional, social, and moral judgment on any other circadian rhythms. But if you think back to pre-industrial, pre-electric light, really, situations as recent as the 19th century, right? You have people keeping all kinds of different patterns. Even today in super rural France and parts of Scandinavia and Russia, like higher up, closer to the Arctic Circle, there are people that bed down for the winter. They're like humans who almost hibernate. They sleep up to 14 to 16 hours a day. They only go outside to kind of like pee and feed the animals. They're just in conservation mode, and that goes from way back when they had it all stored away for the starving times, right? So the first thing, richness, time richness, and a way to do this cheaply is to own your own circadian rhythm. Imagine, just here's a scenario, that each of us got to wake up feeling fully rested just at the end of our own natural sleep cycle. right? So 90-minute sleep cycles is kind of how we go. We kind of string those together through any given period of slumber. And that's why naps that are less than that but put you in halfway, you can kind of come out with like part of your hard drive defrag, but not all of it, and feel foggy or groggy. So let's just imagine we wake naturally, feeling completely fully rested. We engage our day in peaks and valleys of exertion and concentration. We take a midday siesta where we eat lunch, make love, snooze, wake back up, have another cycle of productive effort until 4 or 5 or 6, and then there's whatever, right? I mean, the bottom line is like choose our own adventure, but be free to do so. And Ram Dass said once upon a time that he seemed to notice, at least in the 60s and 70s, that there was a correlation between people who were further along in their developmental path, sort of just, again, measurable adult development, that people who are further along are people who work for themselves. Because the bottom line is, if you're working for the man, if there's bullshit office politics, if there's all that kind of first in, last out, all that kind of garbage that has nothing to do with productivity, nothing to do with long-term sustainable performance, and everything to do with the appearance of being all in, even though we know everybody's dicking around on their social media and they're surfing and they're shopping and they're looking at Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So productivity is a total sham. And we know that performance drops off a cliff after 50 hours max. And even 50 hours is not indefinitely sustainable. So the first thing, building mansions of time, is own your own circadian rhythm. Imagine how less stressful life would be if you were never having to slam a cup of coffee, if you were never having to hit the alarm, if you were never having to just gut it out, if you were never having to like prop your eyelids open during a duller than dirt 2 in the afternoon meeting, right? Those are the just death of me, right? So imagine if we never had to do that, and you're literally choosing much more like an animal, like a panther or a lion, right? I mean, I exert with incredible precision and focus when I do, and then I chill up in a tree, taking the day in. So the idea of those kinds of, what we're trying to get rid of in the middle, by the way, is distress. You want deep recovery as your foundation, which is what we've just been talking about, the sense of time abundance. And again, a different set of Stanford research has correlated time abundance with greater equanimity, greater compassion, greater self-reported life satisfaction, a whole bunch of things. So there's sort of known quantifiers on all this. But then imagine, excuse me, I'm just going to have a cup of tea. I'm having this is my 11s for those of you that aren't English. Paddington Bear made these famous, but they are a time-honored technique of actually making it through the day. Americans, I think, should really institute some more tea customs, because I'll tell you, Red Bull and instant coffee doesn't cut it. So where were we? We were speaking about time. We were speaking about our circadian rhythms. We were speaking about the ability to perform at work. And yeah, I think, and then even throw in nighttime. Right? So back in the day, you guys are probably all familiar with this notion of polyphasic sleep. People never used to sleep 8 hours through a night, right? It was often broken into at least 2 cycles of combined sleep cycles of up to 3 hours or so each. And people would come to the surface. They would write, they would read, they would pray, they would make love, they would visit their neighbors, they'd get something to eat. I mean, a whole notion. And what do we do now? If we're not sleeping 8 hour, regular 8 hours, we dose ourselves to the gills with Ambien and other things like that, which have profoundly gnarly impacts on our circadian rhythms and our biorhythms. So step 1 is own our circadian rhythm. Just listen. If you could just design your day, if you're on like your second week of a holiday, what is your natural pattern? And do everything you can to orient your life around it, because when we're not in it, we actually are secreting norepinephrine and cortisol. Excuse me, in much higher quantities, because we're having to like force our system. We're having to do forced overrides to focus, to perform, to exert, right, to do any of those things. So step 1, circadian rhythms. Step 2, I know where we were. We were in the eustress and the distress, and the foundation is active recovery. So distress is literally bad stress. Eustress is good stress, like breaking down muscles to build them stronger when we lift weights. Right? Or the process of just growing up and being like, okay, wow, having a child, for instance, is a eustressful situation in the best case, right? So what we're trying to get rid of is the distress, and the distress is just the fibrillating, right, low level agitation to our system. And being out of step with our circadian rhythm means we create a lot more distress in our nervous systems. We're constantly having to override the natural sine wave and push it or force it. We're having like jamming it forward or holding it or damming it up. And we can remove much of the distress, have deep active recovery when we're in alignment with our circadian rhythms, right? Delta brainwave sleep is in deep sleep, and that is where we annex and integrate all of our learning. And not to mention just muscular rest, psychological rest, all the things that happen through a full sleep cycle are profoundly in the realm of active recovery. And then you get rid of the fibrillating distress, the nervous system overloads, and we create just eustress. And eustress is maximum times of input effort or just energy into our self systems, right? Which we then can incorporate, integrate, and grow from. And that is the path to moving along faster. So as we do that, right? We've been talking all within the realm. In fact, Karen Armstrong, the religious scholar, among many others, this is an ancient Greek combination of terms, but talked about kairos being sacred time, chronos being mundane or horizontal day-to-day time, clock time, right? And so what we've just been talking about is how do you, at a minimum, get a little closer to the intersection of those two, right? Via chronos, via our day-to-day lives. So if we can tune our actual time-bound calendars and when we show up, where and how within them, we can be a little more in the realm of eustress and active recovery versus just in perpetual, like perma-distress, right? And that's generally speaking a good thing. But the other thing that happens is we spend more time in because we've just been talking about timelessness. When you get to spend more time in the timelessness, another element that comes with it is selflessness. So we get to spend time arguably outside of chronos, right? Outside of past, present, future causation planning, risk avoidance, sensation seeking, wish fulfillment, right? And we get to spend more time in, again, back to Zimbardo's deep now. That in itself lends us a glimpse of kairos. And when we can spend, so basically optimizing chronos can get us closer to the intersection, right? It's getting to the 0, coordinates on the Cartesian grid of kairos and chronos. And by tuning our own biorhythms, we can get closer to that intersection. Now, the final piece is, as we get there, we start being able to glimpse, there's a bit of an overlay of kairos, of sacred time. We're like, oh, selfless, timeless, information rich. I'm starting to experience maybe things that stand outside of time, eternal truth, platonic realm of ideal forms, whatever you want to call it, right? And then you realize, this is like plutonium. The more I can hang out right here at the intersection of kairos and chronos, right? Feet in the world and on the clock, right? But head and heart, right? Out of time. And perceiving the eon, right? And in fact, who was it? It was Heraclitus, the Greek. He said, fantastically suggestively, given the psychotechnologies we have available these days, he said the eon, meaning the eternal sort of cosmic Christ child, the thing that shows up in the end of 2001, right, the movie. The eon is a child at play with colored balls. And as you get to glimpse the eon, you realize, oh, this is super information, dense, right, location for me to hang out and be self-aware, and I can receive information that is uncannily potent when I bring it back through into chronos. And so this is what we see with the research on microdosing, the research on transcranial magnetically induced flow states, on creativity. It's all these things, validated in the best. I've got an overzealous golden retriever puppy right here. Let's see, where is she? Where is she? There she is. She is mauling me for my cookie. But so fundamentally, right, all of this research and all of these studies show very clearly, oh my gosh, just one sec, I'm really betwixt and between here. She's about to grab my cookie and I've got a hot cup of tea in my hand and a phone in the other. Okay, there we go. Bam.